The term aesthetic is defined as the perception, interpretation, and appreciation of beauty, a value that provokes emotions of admiration, awe, and fascination upon viewing, as well as plenitude, connection, and oneness when creating. Aesthetics begin with an understanding of who you are inside and out to solidify multiple narrative sequences in the visual manner you see fit. By dressing authentically and intentionally, you may enhance physical attributes through self-expression within fit, balance, and proportion for self-concept, style, and intention. An aesthetic will capture varying attitudes of all sides, with a tangibly conjured up execution, resulting in an instrument of expression, drawing inspiration from within as well as a wide range externally that allow for creative impulses to have a place in the world. To have an aesthetic is not to box yourself in and become defined by labels, but rather to define another channel out of many that life has to offer in regards to visual and personal expression that resonates with oneself. It's not to mold yourself to a label or to cause distress over not being a quote-unquote proper fit, but to simply be and creatively express your own personality, interests, intelligence, and experience through a lens you feel well suited to. In regards to fashion, your style is a combination of all you think, feel, covet, and do. Aesthetics are a component of this, as we will be drawn to certain visuals due to our own individual psychology and philosophies of beauty. The act of forming an aesthetic is to create visuals in your mind's eye that align with the set of leading principles by which you live through actions, demeanor, and outward appearance married to internal states. The aesthetic experience of enjoying and creating are inevitably intertwined, as fashion is experienced on a multitude of levels, innately both internally as well as externally, and the act of honing an aesthetic is both sensory and emotional. It should be noted, a personal aesthetic is not necessary, but many do long for one and strive to create it, due to how fashion provides a very special space for belonging in the world through knowledge, understanding, and acceptance that shapes a visual narrative of our lives. If you're interested in the study of fashion and how people signify specific social or cultural positions through dress, as well as why we are psychologically drawn to certain aesthetics, I have a video dedicated to the semiotics of fashion. Philosopher David Hume states, "Beauty and things exist in the mind which contemplates them." We see our own application when defining, finding, and developing our own personal aesthetic, as aesthetics are compiled by the mind and emotions relative to one's sense of beauty, hence the development of taste through views and perception. This may be both from contrived or natural sources that are found within and hand with outer principles governing the idea of aesthetics based on time, location, culture, values, etc. This is always present and evolving. For example, from the 80s into the 90s, this age of the supermodel had taken the world by storm, hence the very traditional, bright, charming details and lavish design approaches, providing this fresh, indulgent aesthetic that many would partake in. With the economic crash and social factors of the 90s, anti-fashion was on the rise, though at its core shocking to the public. The fashion industry embraced anti-fashion rhetoric with open arms and development over time. Hence, the standards of beauty in terms of visual aesthetics of style shifted as the use of proportion, ensembles, and even presentation shifted. From this, multiple aesthetic channels opened up, being infused into these previously defined aesthetic codes. Just in this decade of this example, we can see the main and sub-channels of aesthetics that branch out, providing multiple versions of beauty that resonate with an individual based on where they are in life and their view of fashion that encapsulates their romantic and logical idea about life. or their own placement in the world. When viewing emerging ideologies in terms of aesthetics and beauty, our own relationship to societal standards furthers our own philosophies, and within our life, we ourselves get to partake in the act of creation for a reflection of our spirit externally, as in the words of Ralph Waldo Emerson, "Love of beauty is taste. The creation of beauty is art." In the 1930s, aesthetics of dress were influenced by innovation. Fashion at this point in time stressed the importance of dressing to personality traits through quote-unquote fashion types, very similar to character types in media today that resonate with people, but this was applied in the real world through marketing at the time. Into the 70s and 80s, the focus shifted into achieving a distinctive and individual aesthetic in a time where culture placed value on individuality amidst the flourishing abundance. Both these channels have grown over time into the ones we have today. For this, we can see how apparel functions in terms of aesthetic and how this is an evolving aspect of our culture, which begs the question, what causes something to truly resonate and be a part of our aesthetics? The artistry of a piece will resonate, the way it's designed, the meaning, story, and conceptual life behind the product to produce an authenticity depending on the intrinsic sense of beauty philosophy the eye has that resonates if worthy of acceptance based on one's sense of self or coveted image by which they're drawn to. This, by extension, is still part of oneself, to find, hone, or develop in subject and intention. Many people who are drawn to the same or similar aesthetics will further the philosophical identity and the meaning of it as psychologically. The visuals that hone an aesthetic will create connotations and links to concepts that provide further meaning to the imagery on both a personal and group shared experience. The emotional process by which an authentic aesthetic comes to be is a subconscious one as a function, cultural connotation, color psychology, beauty philosophy, and overall concept linked to visuals will define this, which is why we are often inspired by other mediums in terms of dress. Typically, an aesthetic is obtained from interest, inner psychology or sociology, philosophy, lifestyle, fashion preferences, and the type of self-expression one is looking to achieve. Each piece that goes into curating the aesthetic tells a story in itself and has so much thought and intent behind it. By wearing the piece, you are furthering this aesthetic narrative, as this is an inherent beautiful instinct through personal taste, life experiences, interest, and evolving variables. Rather than aspiring to define yourself, you can curate what you know and display how you know it with clothing. When curating an aesthetic in terms of fashion, the first thought is to look at fashion. This is necessary and a great foundation, but it also can be a disservice to oneself, as fashion is a tangible depiction of a time, concept, or place. By taking on another's aesthetic, you're disregarding these elements and essences of yourself when honing an aesthetic rather than having these pieces dictate your configuration. You want to get to the root of the concept and configure this accordingly to you. Inspiration can be found in numerous imagery, from architecture and paintings to music and films. Each piece that goes into curating an aesthetic tells a story and has so much thought and intent behind it, from the derived source, as well as your own personal narrative. This type of thinking allows for one to never be boxed in or confined to a label. Protocols of dress have evolved into multiple avenues of channels and aesthetics today that hold the nature of fashion in a modern age, with much access to multifaceted channels of aesthetics. More often than not, one may be drawn to multiple labels of aesthetics, specific components, or a vast array of essences. This is natural because we are dimensional beings. Forcing a single label is to limit and not honor our own magnitudes. It is best to explore all aspects of apparel and feel what truly harmonizes. While names and labels aid in the development as a tool, or a vehicle of exploration. Falling under a label is not the end goal. An aesthetic is an ever-changing and evolving part of ourselves. To hinder this is to hinder development for the sake of visuals, rather than honing the visuals of our lives. To blend aesthetics, retaining a proper balance and harmony is crucial. To allow for the aesthetics unique from one another, to seamlessly blend to the eye. With this foundation, further elements and embellishments are easier to integrate in, despite differing as the community of saturation value in the relationship of visual effect. Create space for implementation. If unsure, think of its concept and how this will interact within the other aesthetic. This relationship and interaction conceptually can be tangibly captured. For example, there are varying degrees of formality and unification. Under the aesthetic, the contrast of a structural garment provides an unparalleled sensation that illuminates the underlying tone of aesthetic combinations. Another technique to infuse elements that execute your aesthetic is pattern play, meaning to choose an element to dominate while the others accent. Scaling patterns, textures, and breaking them down will create focal points for the look in solidarity. By finding common ground or contrast that allows for further emphasis on both forms, the aesthetic will fall together. Layering is another way to add varying degrees, which can be strategically done to highlight features and balance out concepts, which will evoke the sensibility of an aesthetic. With more on searching for your aesthetic in terms of inspiration between runways, trends, and remaining true to yourself. In terms of style, my friend Bella will fill you in with some tips on the process.
Hey guys, it's Bella, and I'm going to be talking about my side of the advice for finding your personal style, your personal aesthetic. So it is not gonna be, short and easy or whatever. It took me years to really realize what I actually like. I'm gonna be honest, it took years, but I'm going to pretty much say how I did it. You can find inspiration in literally anything for fashion, seriously. I've looked outside before and just randomly got ideas for outfits. Pinterest is just the best for inspiration because you know what? People like me, I follow a lot of people and you have to find those people. They have multiple boards of different aesthetics because you can love multiple aesthetics. That's, there's no rules. So, go through those boards and kind of take inspiration from them all and find the things that you love and you resonate with. Make your own boards and find out okay, how can I interpret this aesthetic into a style? And also Vogue Runway. Seriously, Runway, you will get so much inspiration once you really dig deep into Vogue Runway because Runway is where the trends start. That's where they originate from. Also, if you want to get some inspiration of trends, Runway is where it's at because Runway is always ahead of the game. And also old Runway shows. That's where I get my inspiration, early 2010s Runway, late 2000s Runway. I get a lot of inspiration from. It's funny because once you start realizing the runways that you take the most inspiration from, that's how you find what your personal style is because they'll all kind of connect to each other in a way. Even if they're different styles, they will find a way to connect and then you mix them all together and it will be one aesthetic, one personal style. Again, you do not have to have one single aesthetic. Fashion is supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be serious. So there's nothing wrong with being versatile. Completely different vibes in every single outfit you wear. Because if your main aesthetic is many aesthetics mixed into one. Honestly, that's how most of these fashion icons, that's how they're giving their name. Because people love their vibe and their aesthetic. And it's multiple aesthetics mixed into one. Do not overcomplicate finding your aesthetic built into one. Style is aesthetic. Seriously, fashion is everything.
When moving from the curation stage to development, you will begin to build a wardrobe based off identity over a given guide. This is a fluid process. If something speaks to you, retain this. Trends may resonate and be a part of your aesthetic, but more often than not, they will fall short over time. All in all, the development is a journey to embark on, to breathe life into your aesthetic and to live your philosophy. and see beauty through a lens that is crafted by the heart, drawing from all that you love and see fit in life that will stay with you in your ensembles, rather than having this defined for you. In the words of Deepak Chopra, to define yourself is to limit yourself. Without labels, remain an infinite being. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe, like, turn on notifications, and comment. Thank you so much for watching.